Algebra Chapter 1, Section 1 is powers, absolute values, combining like terms, and simplifying fractions. And we start out with a definition of variable. A variable is a letter that stands for a number. A letter that stands for a number. Constant is a number, and it's called a constant because if it's a number, it never changes. It always stays that value, so it does not change. Numerical expression is just numbers and operators, or add, subtract, multiply, divide. We will call those operations. And an algebraic expression is numbers, letters, or variables, whatever you want to call it, and operations. So a numerical expression would be something like 10 plus 5, and an algebraic expression would be something like 10x plus 5y, because that would have the variable in there. And power, I'm going to write x and y. This is called the base, and this is called the exponent. And the first one that we have is 4 to the third power, and that means we are going to do 4 times 4 times 4. And on our graphing calculator, you're going to do 4 up arrow 3 and then hit enter. And 4 to the third power is 64. Second one is -9 squared, and with the graphing calculator you have to put these parentheses around it. That means -9 times -9. In our graphing calculator, you do parenthesis, you put the negative in first, and your parenthesis, and you can either hit the squared button and it will have squared for you, or you can do -9 and then up arrow 2. -9 times -9 is a positive 81. Now this third one here might be a little bit different than you've learned it in the past. You need to do your exponents first. So this actually means 9 squared, 9 times 9, which is 81, and then you put the negative in front of it. This one had the parentheses around it, so it was -9 times -9. And with this one, according to the order of operations, you do 9 squared, which is 81, and then put the negative in front of it. Example 1 asks us to write these using powers. There are 3 5s, so that would be 5 to the third power. There are 4 x's, so that would be x to the fourth. And there are 2 y's, so that would be y to the second. In the second example, there are 3 4's, so that will be 4 to the third. There's 1 x, and then 2 y's, so that becomes y squared. And in the last example, -5 times -5, and if you want -5 times -5, You have to put the parentheses around those. There's 1a, there's 1b, and then c to the fourth power. Example 2. This means -7 times -7 times -7 times -7 times -7. And we will have parentheses, -7, up arrow, 5, which is -16,807. Example 2, we do 6 to the fourth power, and then we put the negative in there. 6 to the fourth power is 1,296, and then we do the negative. 3 and 4 are a little bit different. For number 3, you do each part of that. 3 to the third power is 27. 4 to the third power is 64, and you have 27 over 64. Number 4, we want -2 times -2 times -2 times -2, so we have to do our parentheses. -2 to the fourth is 16. That's on the top of the fraction. And 3 to the fourth is 81. Number 5, we have -4 to the third power, which is -64. And number 6, -4 to the second power. We have our parentheses around there. And without our calculator, we can do this without our calculator. -4 times -4 is a positive 16. So the answer there is 16. Number 7, we want to do 4 to the third power, and then put the negative in front of it. 4 to the third power is 64, and then we do the negative. Number 8, 4 to the second power is 16, and then you do the negative. Next examples using exponents, write 8 as a power of base 2. So we need 2 to some power equals 8. And the best bet here is just to kind of try it a couple times on your calculator. 2 to the first power is 2. 2 to the second power is 4. 2 to the third power, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, and that's the one we are looking for, 2 to the third power. Example 4, write -125 as a power with base of -5. So we want -5 raised to some power is -125. You can do -5 times -5, which equals 25, times -5 is -125. We have multiplied that 3 times, so that would be -5 to the third power. Example 5 says evaluate each expression for the given value. And I will tell you that they have students have a tendency to get this one wrong on the test. Evaluate each expression for the given value. This is 5 times -4 squared. But there's something wrong with that. We want to multiply -4 times -4. So when you enter that in your calculator, you need those parentheses. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16, times 5 is 80. And you can enter that whole thing in your calculator. 5 times negative 4 squared. And you'll notice I use the squared key. You cannot enter this. That does not have the parentheses. And if you do that, you'll get the negative 80. You have to do negative 4 times negative 4, so you need those parentheses. Number 2, we will have 4 times negative 3 to the 4th. Notice we want negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So we have to have parentheses there. And that becomes 324. Number 3, we have negative 2 times negative 3 to the 3rd power. So negative 2, we have to have those parentheses. And then I do up arrow 3. And that becomes a positive 54. And the last one, negative 6 times 2 to the 3rd. Negative 6 times 2 to the 3rd. You'll notice I didn't put this one in parentheses when I put it in my calculator. Doesn't matter with the positive ones. If you did the parentheses, that's fine. If you didn't, that's fine also. And this becomes a negative 48. And let me show you one more thing with these last two questions. If I had kind of shown a little bit more of my work, this would have been negative 2. Negative 3 to the 3rd power is a negative 27. And the negative times the negative made it the positive. And right here, if we would have worked this one out, negative 6 times 8, we have a negative times a positive, so our answer is still negative. On the second page of these notes, absolute value is the distance from 0. So on a number line, it's the distance from 0. And absolute value is always a positive number. And I should tell you those signs are the absolute value signs. So absolute value is positive, it's a distance from 0. So we need to evaluate or come up with a number for these. First one is the absolute value of 4. We're just going to make that a positive, which is a 4. Next one, absolute value of negative 6. Make it a positive, and it's 6. Number 3, we need to do negative 11 plus a negative 4. So you owe me $11, and then you borrow $4 more. Negative 11 plus a negative 4 is negative 15. Still inside those absolute value signs. And now we make those positive, so our final answer is 15. Number 4, 4 plus 8 is 12. So this becomes, that is on the outside of the absolute value, and then we have the 12. Absolute value means make it positive, so this becomes just the number 12. But after we take the absolute value, then we have to put this negative here. So our answer ends up being negative 12. Some of you might be saying, Mrs. Tenbrock, you just said the absolute value is positive. Well, this makes it positive, and then that puts the negative on it. Number 5, we have a negative 11 minus. Absolute value of negative 4 is 4. And if you zip zap that, negative 11 plus a negative 4 is a negative 15. Number 6, zip zap that, a negative 11 plus 4. You're $11 in the hole and you pay somebody back $4, you're at a negative 7. So we have the negative, that's what we have. Absolute value of negative 7 is 7. And then you put the negative out front, so you have negative 7. Number 7, negative 11 plus a negative 7. 11 in the hole, borrow 7 more, go 7 more in the hole, you're at a negative 18. Absolute value of 18 is 18. So 2 times 18 is 36. And number 8, 11 plus a negative 4 is 7. Absolute value of 7 makes it a positive, and then you put the negative in front of it. So you have negative 7. Distributive property, we're going to have A times B plus C. And with the distributive property, maybe you used to draw these little arc kind of things like that. And that becomes AB plus AC. Coefficient is the number that is in front of the variable. And like terms are terms with exactly the same variable. So the next examples we are going to simplify as we distribute. That becomes 12 plus 3x. Number 2, as you distribute, you have 5xy. 5 times 2 is 10, so that becomes a subtract 10y. Number 3, 3 times 4 is 12. And you have the x and the y. Then the subtract. 3x times 10 is 30x. Number 4, negative times a negative is a positive. 2 times 3 is 6, an x and a y. 7 times negative 2 is a negative 14. X times x is x squared. Number 5, the 14x is not in the distribute. And now as you distribute, you have an 8 plus a 4x. These two terms have exactly the same variables, so those two things can be added together. So we have 18x plus 8. Number 6, when you distribute, you will have 6x minus 24. Second distribute here, 9x plus 18. I'm going to zip zap that. 6x and 9x. 6x plus 9x is 15x. Negative 24 plus 18. Enter that in my calculator is a negative 6. And so your answer is 15x plus a negative 6. Next three, distribute. Negative 5x. Negative times a negative is a positive 15. Distributing the second one, you have 6x squared and a minus 12x. Now, these two things have exactly the same variables, and I'm also going to start with my highest variable. So I'm going to write the 6x squared first. Negative 15x minus 12x is a negative 17x, and then plus 15. Number 8 is kind of tricky. This, if we zip zap that, you have the negative in front of the parentheses, and you need to distribute that negative. So that becomes a negative 3x and a negative 4. We distributed the negative, and then this stays the same, and I'm actually going to change it to from subtract to adding a negative. And now we have a negative 3x and a negative 6x, which is a negative 9x. 9 plus negative 4 is 5. Number 9, if we zip zap that and you distribute, you have negative 3x plus a negative 9 plus a negative 4x. 3x plus a negative 4x is negative 7x plus a negative 9. And the last thing we have today is working with fractions. First of all, we're going to add these. In order to add fractions, we need to get the same denominators. So that will be a negative 3/6 plus a negative 5/6, which becomes a negative 8/6, which we can reduce to negative 4/3. And I don't care whether you write negative 4/3, negative 1 1/3, or negative 1.3 repeating. Any of those are fine. Number 2, we're going to change these to twelfths, which is 14/12. And if I multiply both of these by 3, that would be a negative 9/12. 14 plus negative 9 is a 5/12. And that's how we add fractions. You could also do this on a graphing calculator, and I always put parentheses around my fractions. And if you do negative 1 divided by 2 plus negative 5 divided by 6, you would get the negative 1.3 repeating. And if you had been asked for your answer as a fraction, you can go to this math key. Number 1 is fraction, and it will write that as a fraction for you. Let's try the second one that way. Parenthesis 7 divided by 6 plus parenthesis negative 3 divided by 4. 4.166666 repeating, and if you change that, press your math key, 1, that will tell you it's 5/12. So let's try these subtracting ones on our calculator. 7 divided by 6, subtract -3 divided by 4, 1.916666 repeating. Hit your math key, 1, and our answer here is 23/12. And if you would want to write that as 1 and 11/12, either of those answers is fine. Number 4, we have -1/2, subtract parenthesis -5/6, which is -0.3. Go to your math key, hit 1, and that would be 1/3. Multiplying and dividing, if you just have fractions, works the same way. -1/2 times -5/6. And before I hit enter, with multiplying fractions, all you have to do is multiply straight across. -1 times -5 is 5. 2 times 6 is 12. And double checking that, we go to our math key, hit number 1, and you get 5/12. Number 6, we have a mixed number in here. And if you want to do anything with mixed numbers, what I would do is change that to a decimal. 2 divided by 3 is 0.6 repeating. And when I entered this into my calculator, I would do 8/9 times -4.6 repeating. It's a combination of fractions and decimals, and your calculator is fine with that. 8/9 times, again I'm doing parentheses, -4 point. I would hit that button about 10 times. The more times you press that, the more accurate your answer is going to be. You have this ugly decimal, so go to math, number 1, and that is -112/27. And we're just going to leave that answer like that. Number 7, now we're dividing. Actually, let's do number 8 first. And let me remind you, when you divide fractions, you flip the second one upside down and multiply. 7 times 4 is 28. 6 times -3 is -18. And with our graphing calculators, we can also reduce fractions. 28, -18. We just hit fraction again, and that will reduce it to -14/9. And let me show you that one more time. I did 28 divided by -18. Hit the math key, number 1, -14/9. Number 7, we've got this mixed number. So I'm going to do the 8/9 divided by -2. And that fraction I'm going to change to 0.6. When I enter that on my calculator, parenthesis 8/9 divided by, I'll do the parenthesis again, -2 point, and press the 6 a bunch of times. Enter. It's -0.3 repeating. And then if you hit your math key and 1, that is -1/3.